Hi all and welcome into this iRacing video. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to set up the Skip Barber. I'm going to run through brake bias, pressures, the SPO, the ARB, fuel levels, pros, cons of each, the sacrifices, the gains. I'll talk about the clutching and gear changing I use. I'll do a quick lap while we just talk about the settings. Okay, let's get into it now. Okay, so the benefit of the Skip, if you're new to doing a setup series, non-fixed, is that there's only a few settings that you can change. You've got the brake bias, the pressures all round, spring perch offset or the SPO, fuel level, and the ARB, the anti-roll bar. Okay, up first, the brake bias. This is the baseline setup, so as you can see we're running 55. The benefits of going lower is you're less likely to lock up the front tyres. You're going to have a shorter braking distance. The cons would be that it's slightly less stable, lowering the brake bias, and on entry to a bend, when you're coming off the throttle, you're going to notice more, coming off the brake, you're going to notice more oversteer, snap oversteer, as you might call it. So obviously those are mitigated by increasing the brake bias, but you're more likely to lock up the front tyres with increased front brake bias. You are going to find it more stable, but you're going to have those longer braking distances, so you're going to have to brake early, but you won't have as much as a worry about the snap oversteer. So what direction do I run it? Compared to the baseline, I usually come down. Now, down is generally the direction you want to go for performance. The pros will be even lower than I am. If you're new to the series, go the other direction, learn, try and get your braking control better, because then you can start bringing your brake bias down. End of the day, it shortens your braking distances, and that oversteer that gives you that snap can also be used for the right amount of control to get your vehicle pointing in the correct point in the bend. So there's more versatility with lower brake bias. I run usually at 54. I have run 53 once, I think, but I wouldn't run 53 at a circuit like this at Barcelona. So to recap, lowering, slightly less stable, more oversteer, the snap oversteer fill-in, but you get shorter braking distances and you're less likely to lock up the fronts. The other direction, you're more likely to lock up the fronts, but if you take that into consideration that you're going to be locking up in a straight line as opposed to snap oversteering on entrance to the bend, if you're new, then that may be the way to go. Okay, pressures. The baseline runs 25 at the front and 27 at the rear. I run 25 all the way around. Okay, let's talk about the benefits of each direction. Lowering the tyre pressure does give you more grip, but you exponentially heat up the tyres quicker, and if you're driving poorly and you're sliding the tyres around, this lower PSI is going to scrub the tyres and overheat them exponentially a lot faster. You're also going to notice, unfortunately, slightly less wheel input with the lower pressures compared to having higher pressures. I run it at the low. Let's discuss the higher pressures now. Higher pressures, less grip, much less chance of overheating the tyres, more driver input. So much like with the brake bias, you can go either way to get pros. If you're new to the series, maybe try 27s all the way around. You'll have them reduce grip levels, but you'll find the car a lot easier to drive. But as I say, if you're new to the series, if not, work your way down, all the way down to the 25s all the way around if you can. Now, I'm sure you noticed on the baseline, you can run these out of sync, and there's a balance that can be found to help performance as well. So if you run the fronts lower than the rears, you're going to find more oversteer. If you run the fronts higher than the rears, you're going to find more understeer. So that can help, once again, driver dependent and especially track dependent. If you're trying to dial in the car, that can help. I've done this once before. I forget the track, but I was struggling in one bend, so especially for qualifying I was, because obviously qualifying you only get 2 hot laps and it's quite difficult to get the tyres up to temperature in the skip in a short qualifying session like that. So that's another trick that can help find a good balance for the car. Okay, let's head over to SPO, spring perch offset. This is where I find the baseline's way off what it should be. 0, I have never run that low. I think the lowest I've ever run is a 3. I typically run a 4. Let's discuss the benefits now. SPO, the lower it is, so the direction iRacing had you in the baseline, is increased ride height, more understeer. So once again, we're not heading down the direction of performance, we're heading down the direction of easier to drive. But my advice would be run it at 3 and swim in the deep end, learn to control the car. There's so much more benefit running the SPO a little bit higher, where your ride height is massively reduced. And due to the camber reduction, you're going to notice that oversteer, but once again, it can be used to benefit you through the bends. Gives you that more of a versatile feel to the car. One thing to note though, you can run an SPO of 5, which is allowed. Yellow's just a warning, not a nothing wrong with a yellow. It's letting you know you're getting close to the limit. But with a ride height reduction that, for example, at Barcelona, if you was to hit a sausage curb or run any of the tall curbs, which there's no tall curbs here at Barcelona apart from the sausage curbs, you can damage the car quite seriously. If you're running at 5 and full speed over one of those sausage curbs, you're probably going to find damage. It can be to the level where you get the black and orange flag to come into for repairs. So bear that in mind. It's a track dependent feature. I have run 5 before, but I think it was once. Typically I run 4. I ran 3 a much longer time ago when I was trying to learn the car and get up to speed in it. So to sum up again, lower SPO in the direction of this, increased ride height, more understeer. The other direction that I tend to go, reduced ride height, more oversteer due to the camber reductions. Okay, fuel level. Has it at a ridiculous number. For race, all you need is 3.1. For qualifying, 2.1. Don't forget to change it back. If you run qualifying at 2.1, your race setup will be 2.1. So you need to change it after quali before the race. Put a post-it note on your screen if you have to. If you're not going to remember and you're not going to make a mental note, then don't do it, because the benefits are small, but there are benefits. So if you're looking to gain some time in qualifying, dropping it down to 2.1 will help you. You'll get a full session in. Other than that, every race I've run this season hasn't needed more than 3.1, so bear that in mind. Okay, last up is ARB. Now, to call this a slider of experience would be better than me summarizing all the benefits. The higher, the more experience, the lower, the less experience. So 5 in coming from the baseline setup is not actually a bad number to start learning. Lowering the ARB, this direction, is ideal for the slow stuff, or the slow corners. You get more roll at the rear, you get nice turn-in control. However, a low number at the fast stuff would lead to less stability, especially because this car airs on high oversteer coming out of a bend. The higher the number, the better you can control and maintain that speed from the oversteer on exit of bends. But that does come with the need of experience. So when I first started in the Skip, I used to drive it more like an F3 car, keeping my car very straight and precise. But over time, I've been watching the fast guys and how they do it, and I realised the higher ARB is one of the major benefits they were utilising. So higher ARB, while you get that less rear roll, you gain the benefit of oversteer control, because if you overload the car on a long fast bend and your car is rolling too much, you're going to get uncontrollable oversteer. I'm sure you've all experienced it in the Skip, where the car exponentially slides to the point where it's gone. So increasing the ARB can help, but once again, this is very driver dependent. I typically run a 6 at this track. I do run 7 other tracks, and I haven't actually raced here yet, so I've got to put more time in. But if we just quickly look around, this is pretty much the baseline I would call for my Skip. This is my baseline, what I would run, and then I dial in per track. So 54, 25 all round, 4 SPO, 3.1 gallons if it's race, 2.1 if it's quali, 6, 7. I 6 more my personal baseline. Okay, so what if you're new and you want a baseline that's going to help you control the car a little bit more? I would go brake bias 55, 56 if you really are struggling with snap oversteer. Maybe try your pressures at 27 all round. That will give you a good balanced feel with wheel input. Sure, you get the reduced grip, but the Skip's more about control through the bends than it is pure grip. SPO, maybe try 3, work your way up. I find 4 the perfect balance for myself. Fuel, obviously 3.1 for a race, 2.1 for a quali. ARB 5 or 6 if you're new, but with the aim to push that up. You can run 8. I don't think I ever have. I think I've run a 7. and I don't think I've ever run a 4, so 5, 6, 7 is my range, and it's been a while since I ran 5. So start around 5, work your way up. Okay, so I think that's everything on the setup side. That's all the settings you can change. So I've got some track config saved, but for example, if we load up Zandvoort, you're probably going to find it's my baseline. 54, 25 all round, 3.1, 6 and 4. So I find that pretty optimal. Let's load up that setup. Next thing is gearing. I've had this question a lot. For this car and only this car, I use the setup I'm about to show you, which is pretty unique, and I don't use it on any other car. I just find it really works well with the Skip. I applied a secondary clutch. So here, if I press my clutch pedal down here, you'll see my clutch pedal engage. Here we go. That's fine. If I press my secondary clutch, which is just a button, I get 100% instantly. So I've put it in line, hope you can see that there, with my shift up. So I can press it and shift up nice at the same time and get a very quick gear change. Mix that with the anti-stall clutch rather than the auto blip, and you're going to notice a much better performance for your race, because you don't need to use the clutch to change down a gear as long as you're not on the throttle. So when you're on the brakes, come down through the gears nicely. When you're upshifting, use the button clutch to make the change nice and quick. You can also change gear just by lifting the throttle. You don't have to use the button clutch. If you want to lift the throttle, change and then re-engage the throttle, that's fine, it works just fine. Let me show you how I start a race. So I'll pull out here so we can put onto a nice straight and just test it. Okay, imagine this is the start. I put it in, neutral. I put it in first gear. I press down my button clutch, floor the accelerator, green light, I lift the button, and away we go. May not look like much, but at a circuit like Phillip Island, I was pulling a car's length by the end of the straight at the start of the race compared to the cars around me who were running auto blip starts with just what most people use. So the only thing to take into consideration with this clutching setup is the blipping. If you're changing down gears in a straight line, you're not going to notice much of a change, but let's try it here. If I change down to second, hold on, let me try and get some more speed up. I want to show you the snap oversteer if you don't blip. So we'll get some speed up for this bend, and I'll change down to third mid-bend, and hopefully you get to see what I'm talking about. I have to remember not to blip. Nope, that wasn't it. That was just me driving deliberately bad. Sorry, it's hard to deliberately do something you train yourself not to do. Let's try it here. We'll try second gear, mid-bend. Come into the bend. There you go. So you get a kick of oversteer, which you probably can't pick up, but I can feel it in the force feedback. So all you need to do to compensate that is if you're braking, if you're gear changing on a bend, make sure you give the throttle a blip. So we'll do it here. I'll get into fourth early, third gear, blip when we change, and you get much smoother control with the car. It's going a bit slow there for the downforce levels, but we'll try it here as well. Change up early just so we can do it. If you blip third, you get no pull on the force feedback for oversteer. Here's a good example of not needing it. So we're braking a straight line. Let's just change early so we get down some gears. So I brake nice and late, third, fourth, second gear, and I didn't blip. I just was off the throttle on the brake, changing the gear. So for example here I always blip, so we come into it sharp here, second gear, you get to see what I'm talking about. Blip for turning, for straight line you don't need to. Nice and flat through here. With all our SPO settings we get that nice feel in the car. Tyres are probably a little bit too cold to hammer it through here right now. That's the other point with the Skip I want to get on. Qualifying is quite difficult. Do everything you can on the outlet to heat up the tyres. It's a difficult thing to master, skipping and qualifying. If you're new to it, I feel for you. It can be quite tough. It's better now they've employed the tyre blankets. The early V7 tyre model in qualifying was a joke. It's better now. It's not easy. Was it Road Atlanta? It's difficult. Some of the bends, if they're long, it can be really difficult to hold onto the rear of the car. So heat up the tyres. And remember in the race you need 2.5 laps, especially if you spend a lap following cars. You're not quite putting the load through the tyres. You're side by side, so you're teetering on the steering inputs and you're not putting all the full load onto the tyres, just be careful. Even beginning of lap 3, if you haven't been putting in the maximum, by putting in the maximum while being careful. Remember, you cannot extract the maximum on those first 2 laps. If you do, you're going to put it in a wall. I guarantee you. The Skip cold tyres is a completely different animal to when the Skip has hot tyres. So I think that's covered everything. We've talked about the brake bias, the tyre pressures, the SPO, the ARB. Remember, you can offset the tyre pressures to battle oversteer, understeer, whatever you're struggling with. Every setting, there is no right setting. So there's no point asking me in the comments what the golden is. I've told you what my baseline is, and then I take the baseline, do a minimum of 8 laps, and then I start analysing how the car feels. I come back to the setup, try dialing in 1 setting at a time. Don't change 2. What are you going to learn? Change 1 at a time. Once again, do a good amount of laps to get some heat through the tyres, get comfortable with the car, because if you make any changes, you're going to have to learn to drive those changes as well. So don't expect a setting just to pump lap time in like that. So dial in your settings and find your own per track settings and find your own baseline. I mean, the baseline I gave you is just to try and help outperform the baseline iRacing give you, which I am not a fan of their baseline at all. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you, all you guys, in the comments, social media, Discord, however. Let me know what setups you run. Let me know if you find the same sort of situations I've outlined with how the setups affect the feel of the car. It is a kind of a different beast since there's the new tyre model on the Skip, but great car, great fun. If you want to get into setups, this is a great car to start at because, 6 settings to change, whereas the BMW GTE for IMSA, there must be 56 settings and the balance of the car can be affected. You can throw the red light warnings by changing 1 setting, it affects something else. It can get a bit of it can be exciting but a bit overwhelming. Alright guys, I really hope you liked this video. Like if you like, sub if you want to see the next one, and bell notification if you know when it drops. But other than that, thank you very much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.